I haven't shipped a single analysis without this skill reviewing it first in the past 4 months. And at this point, I'm not going back. I've been a data scientist for 8 years. And for the past 2, I've been going deep into integrating AI into how I work. Now, most of us started using AI to optimize the technical parts of our work. We wanted to do coding faster, data cleaning faster, and analysis faster. And that was the right first step. But I think it's time that we move into this next phase where we actually use AI to do our work better. Now, I've created 3 Claude skills that put 8 years of judgment into how I work with AI. The first skill is all about pressure testing the work that I'm going to commit to do. The second one acts as an analyst-peer-reviewer, which I think it's what's missing from a lot of data teams. And the last one is all about how I present my findings to stakeholders in a way that is effective, in a way that lasts. And this is how I've been working for years. And now I've been able to condense all of that into these skills. Now, this is where I think you're going to get the most value from this video, aside from building the skills, of course, especially if you're early in your career. I want to give you the framework behind these 3 skills and show you what's actually missing from most analytics workflows. Now, you're probably familiar with this cycle here. This is a typical analytics workflow. Usually, it starts with a stakeholder having an idea. If they think this idea is worth pursuing, they're going to come to us with a question, right? The data team. We then refine it, we do some planning, and eventually we start the analysis. Now, after doing all of this, we are going to do a verification step, validate that everything looks good, and eventually present our findings to the stakeholder. If they think this is enough, they'll take it and do whatever they need to do. If not, if something is missing, we go through the cycle all over again, right? You're familiar with this. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is a step where we've put most of the emphasis in using AI. This is where we've integrated AI into our workflows, in the analysis part, in the analysis phase of this cycle. Now, this is what I did myself. Now, when I started, I built, several workflows. I used LangChain to create like a data cleaning agent, an EDA agent. I built several skills to do this. And by the way, if you want me to actually share how I've done those, let me know in the comments and I'll create a video for that. But this is just one phase of the entire cycle, right? What happens to the parts before the analysis or the parts after the analysis, which are equally as important? Now, this is why I think my 3 skills are so powerful, because they cover 3 key areas, 3 key blind spots, areas where we've actually just kind of left it up to us to do. And a lot of times we tend to neglect. I mean, just the verification step alone, this is something that I know a lot of juniors especially don't do right. And I've even seen seniors who rush through analysis because they don't have enough time. And frankly, there isn't anyone in your team sometimes who has the time to act as a peer reviewer, right? So aside from the analysis, which there's a lot of opportunities to optimize and automate, this is the areas where we need to start putting a lot more judgment. And it's one thing to just introduce human judgment, which is great, but we're limited by what we can see and how much we can process at once. And this is why I think AI is actually adding so much value. Now, if you're new to skills, I'm going to give you a quick introduction on how this works. This is going to be especially useful if you've never built this skill before, or if you're still unsure about how they work behind the scenes. Now, if you know all of this, you're welcome to skip to the next section where I show you the first skill, all right? Now, a skill is just a markdown file that contains instructions. Now, these instructions are things that tend to repeat often in your workflow. Now, you've probably heard of Claude MD files or Agents MD files. Those are similar, but what they contain is general conventions, general rules about how you do development. Skills are similar, but they tend to be instructions that often repeat themselves, okay? So if you're doing analysis often and you're always doing data cleaning, then you want to have a skill for how you approach data cleaning, all right? Now, inside of a skill file, of the markdown file, we have 2 parts. We have a formatter and we have body content. Now, the formatter is just basically metadata. this is going to tell the agent or the LLM what the skill is about. And this is extremely useful because it tends to be a short section of metadata that allows the LLM to decide if they should use or invoke the skill, right? Rather than actually loading every single part or like the entire content of that skill into the context window and overloading the context window, the decision is going to be made based on this short description, right? So it's important that we have something useful and descriptive here. Now, the body content is the instructions themselves, right? It can be the rubric, the framework, whatever you have in this skill. And it can be as long as you want. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve. Now, this is another thing that is actually quite useful to know. Where do skills live? Because I think a lot of people get confused, especially if they're using multiple coding tools. Now, this is going to change a little bit across the board. If you're using Claude or Claude Code, right, your skills could live in two different places. They could live at the project level or the global level. So the project level is if you have a specific repo and you want to create skills that are just specific to that repo, that project, you can put them inside of your project, inside of the hidden directory .claude, okay? You're then going to create a skills directory. That's where all your skills go. And inside, you're going to create a directory with the name of the skill that you want to create. Inside of that directory, you're going to have the markdown file, which the name is just going to be the same across the board. All your skills, the instructions are going to be named skill.md. All right. Now, again, if you're doing it at the project level, then you, of course, just put it inside of your project, inside of the .claude directory inside of your project. If you want this to be available across all your projects in your machine, then you can find the global .claude directory. If you're in Cursor, then it works almost the same way, but instead of putting it inside of your .claude directory, you're going to put it inside of a .cursor directory, okay? And if you want to do it at the global level, works in a similar way. So same skill MD format, different folder paths depending on the tool that you're working with. All right. Now let me actually walk you through each one of the skills so that you understand how they work behind the scenes and how to use them effectively. Now, what I have here is a project. This is a growth forecasted project. It's actually made up because obviously I can't share what I'm doing at work. But this is the best place where we can play around with this skill and actually show you how they work in action. Now let's start with the feasibility check. Now this is one of the first skills that you're going to use, and it's most useful when you're building large systems. Now this could be machine learning models, or it can be AI systems, which is something that we're doing more and more as data scientists. We're building RAG systems or AI systems and so on. Now, imagine that a stakeholder comes to you and says, hey, I need you to add this new feature to your model, or you need to add this new capability to your system. Is it possible? How long will it take? Now, I don't think AI is that great at estimating, how long things take, but it is really good at giving you a sense of the difficulty and also looking at edge cases that you might miss as you're reviewing manually. Right? So let's actually see what this skill says here. So you assess whether a proposed change to a data or an analytics system is feasible and at what cost before anyone commits to building it or promises an estimate. The failure you exist to prevent, an analyst says sure, medium effort, about a week, and starts building. And halfway through this hits something that they overlooked. Now, this has happened to me so many different times, all right? I look at my system, I try to understand where this new feature could fit into the system, and then realize, I overlooked something. And by that time, I already share an estimate with the stakeholder, and I have to come back and correct myself. Now, this is when you want to call this skill, right? It's going to look at the entire system. You, of course, need to give it a goal. What is it that you're trying to change? And that's what we have here in the argument hint. So it expects a goal that it's trying to evaluate against. And then it's going to read automatically your entire system. It's going to ask you some questions if it needs clarification. Once it understands everything, it's going to go through the framework to basically determine what's possible and what's not. All right. So what we have here is Act 1, get the goal and gather the unknowns. That's the first thing that it needs to do. It needs to trace a path through the real system. It needs to understand the system's ins and outs really, really well. And then it's going to build a breakdown. So let's actually go through Act 3. We're not going to go through everything here because this is unnecessary and you can actually look through this yourself. But a couple of things that I think I wanted this skill to do for me is, what is it that I have already? What is it that I have in place that could help support this new feature? What is it that I need to build? What is it that I can build? Because a lot of times we need to make compromises, or other times we have to say, no, this is just simply not possible because we don't have what you're asking for. And some unknowns. And that's perfect for me as a human. I can then go outside of the system, ask around to a colleague or do some research and figure out, well, what is this thing that we don't know about and how does it fit into our overall plan? All right. Now, Act 4 is judge and deliver. So one thing that I wanted to do that I played around quite a lot with is making sure that this is not returning a bunch of findings in an overwhelming way, right? I wanted to keep it tight. I wanted to keep it short and just, receive what I needed to know so that I know what to start acting on. And then so the way in which this is going to deliver the findings is it's going to give me the verdict in 2 to 3 sentences, so something quite short. It's going to give me a breakdown on what I showed you before, what I have, what I need to build, what I can't accomplish, and some unknowns. And then a recommendation on next steps. Okay, so this is exactly how this works. Now let's actually see how this plays out in this case. All right, so I just opened Claude Code here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my feasibility check. So / feasibility check to call the skill. And of course, as I said, it's expecting a goal. Now, I already wrote something here. I'm going to paste it. And let's see how this works. All right, so it took about a minute to gather information. And now what it's doing is it's checking me to make sure that it understands how everything works and what is it that we're trying to accomplish. Now, what we need to do really here is to go from a monthly forecast to a weekly forecast. And I've referenced a specific forecasting CSV file, and I've mentioned how our executive or our stakeholder is actually trying to get this. So there's already a lot of context in the repo, so it works best when your project already has a lot of documentation and context. But otherwise, it will ask you if it doesn't find it, right? So it says here, when Diego says react faster, what does the exec team actually need to see weekly? So it's actually trying to ask me, why do we even meet weekly from monthly? What is the motivation? And then so I know that that's going to be, weekly leading signal. Then it's going to say, does weekly revenue number have to tie to an official figure? Yes, it must reconcile. And what is the deadline pressure and who maintains this after? So soon and I maintain. All right, so I'm ready to kind of just pass this on and I can take all this information and start actually coming up with a verdict and a breakdown for me. So let's speed up through this process and I show you what it looks like. All right, so now it's done. It took about 30 seconds to read through everything and then make sure that it understands exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. But here's my verdict. So it says feasible with some compromises. We're not going to read through everything here. This is something that I've verified already. But here's the breakdown. It's going to show me what I can do. For example, weekly add revenue source. Only a manual monthly studio export exists. No API for the money on our plan or the revenue in our plan. So this is something to do with YouTube ad revenue and reports from YouTube studio. And then so it already looked through the documentation and understands how that works. And it was able to tell me that what I'm asking for specifically here is not possible. It told me what to do next, and it also is asking me if I want to save a brief that I can then share with my stakeholder. All right, so this is the feasibility check skill. Now, let's go through the second skill, the analyst-peer-reviewer. This one is my favorite by far. It has actually saved me from turning in analyses that were incomplete or completely wrong, right? Sometimes it's you miss the mark. Sometimes you get overwhelmed by the low-level details that you forget to actually anchor on what the main business question was. What was the motivation for the stakeholder coming up to you and asking this for this analysis? All right, so let's actually read what this is about, or the main instruction here. It says, you are an analytical peer reviewer. Your job is to pressure test analytical code. First, verifying the numbers are correct, then challenging whether the analysis actually serves its purpose. Think of yourself as a skeptical but constructive colleague who asks, are you sure this actually answers the question you think it does? So it's not about necessarily checking whether your SQL was reading correctly or whether your Python is, written in the best way possible. It's more about what your analysis or your project outputs and whether that output connects well to the question, okay? So, of course, it's going to have some more information on what this is not, so then it doesn't get confused, and it tries to do something that wasn't really the purpose of this skill. Like, it's not a linter or syntax checker, but we'll skip through that. As the other skill is going to gather context first, so it won't start until it has all the context. Then it's going to map the logic chain. So it's going to look at the source, filters and scopes. This is so actually useful because a lot of time our analysis are based on SQL queries where we do filters or we add, we hard code certain things in our queries that could limit the data that we get, and therefore it could make an analysis wrong. So it needs to go through that. So transformations, aggregations, output, interpretation, and so on. The third part is pressure testing, of course. It's going to look at the code mechanics. It's going to look at the analytical reasoning, which is very important. And then after that, it's going to deliver something that, again, doesn't try to overwhelm me with lots of information. It's going to tell me whether I am good to ship, I need to think on it a bit more, or there's something that I need to fix first. Okay? And then it's going to tell me just maximum of 3 findings that I need to look at. And at the end, it's going to leave me with one question that I need to sit with. So something to reflect on, especially because I'm not expecting this skill to tell me every time that something specific is wrong. Sometimes there's just ambiguity that I need to judge as a human, and that's what this skill is going to help you with. All right? Good. I'm not going to go over how this skill works exactly here. So let's actually go through here. So Claude Code. The only thing that you need to know is that if you want to call the analyst-peer-reviewer, you need to ideally give it a file path. So this could be a file to a notebook if, let's say, you have many notebooks but you only want to review one, or a specific piece of code. If you don't do anything, that still works. If you don't pass it anything, it still will review the entire code base and then check with you to understand what exactly is it that we're trying to verify. Okay, because it needs to anchor this on a specific business question or stakeholder question. All right, now let's go through my last skill, the present analysis skill. Now this is based on how I've been doing my work for the past 5 years. And this is something that I learned from a senior data scientist in one of my jobs, who actually would help me make my analysis reports a lot more effective. Because what I used to do back in the day was I would present every single piece of information. I would, try to be very thorough, and I wouldn't care so much about making my findings actionable, but rather, aim for completeness. And I remember something that stuck with me when we would discuss is, a lot of stakeholders don't have the time. to read everything in detail. That's your job. They are going to trust you to do a thorough job. And what they need to know is what are the key findings and what are your recommendations. So what this skill is going to do is it's going to create an analysis report that is writing things in layers, where we start with a summary of key findings, my recommendations, and then it's going to go into some of the key findings in the form of charts with some observations. So what this does is it offers two things. It offers something that they can skim through fairly quickly if they just want to get the executive summary. And if they feel that they're missing some information or they need to understand it a little bit more, I still show them some of the charts, some of the tables, with some explanation on what I found through that part of the analysis, but without showing every single thing that lived in my notebook. I always link my notebook so that an analyst or someone who is more data savvy can click on it and dive deeper. But the analysis report itself contains only what they need to know to a certain degree. So let's actually go through the deliver part, or the write the report part here. So this is how this structure looks like. And again, this is what I've been doing for the past 5 years, and it has gotten a lot of great feedback from stakeholders. We have an objective, right? 1 or 2 sentences saying what the goal of this analysis was or this project, some context if necessary, key takeaways, recommendations, and then an analysis section where I don't show the full analysis. For that, I link to the notebook. I just show a couple of charts or tables where the heading of the chart is going to be a key finding, and then some observations, so that they don't have to decipher the chart on their own. They actually have my analysis available to them. All right. And then, of course, this can be written into a markdown file that then I can put into Confluence or wherever I, publish all of these things. So that's this percent analysis. And again, if you want to use it, you need to kind of point it to a specific notebook or something. It will still ask you to make sure that it is anchoring on the stakeholders question, which is very important. But that's how this one works. All right, so hopefully you found that walkthrough useful. I wanted to actually teach you how all of this works behind the scenes so that you can start building your own skills in a similar manner and improve on the ones that I'm going to give you. Now, all 3 of these skills are available through this GitHub repo. You can download them, add them to Claude Code or whatever tool you're using. And of course, you're welcome to improve them because the idea is that they should work for your specific use cases, right? Now, if you have any ideas for new videos, new tutorials that you want to see, especially for data scientists, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It helps me a lot. All right, until next time.